do 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 bamba. I think I am live. Hello to everyone. If I am live, I think I am. Let me just get my things in place. Check in. Yes. I'm all good. So, hello everybody. Hello. Do we have it? Hello, Howard. Hello, Sean. Hello, Helen. Hello, David. Oh, some regulars. Yes, I am live. Excellent. So, sorry, it's been a crazy weekend, a crazy day. My children have been here. Adult males, but I feel like I'm a 24-hour chef when they're here. So it just rushed off my feet. Here I have my tea, a different mug, and lots to talk about. I hope you're all well and had a lovely weekend, or having a lovely weekend. Hello, Darren. So lots to talk about. That's good. So we're gonna touch on a couple of things I've seen in the news or in social media, which have irked me. So I just wanted to have a small rant about those. I want to touch on some research I carried out with a friend of mine regarding the end of the world and how it has changed. Something that hasn't existed will change, won't be as we think it is, in terms of mythology. And then I'll talk about a paper I have written around how we understand what a story is in terms of its genre, its classification. So whether it's a folktale, a legend, or myth, and why that is important, and why this paper needs to exist and the benefits it has. So that's the world's not ending today. I'm not announcing the end of the world, Mark or Howard. No, I'm just there's a myth about the end of the world, many eschatological myths, and yes, and it's just interesting how we've discovered how that myth has changed because of certain things that are going on. It's quite interesting, especially considering what's happening today. So lots to talk about, and pretty interesting stuff. So, let's if there's a few of you out there, hello, scriptural context. I don't know, shall we jump straight into it and talk about the end of the world? So, this all happens in the Viking era. Hello, Michael. Hello, Brian. More people are joining. Yes, the end of the world could have happened many times and we don't know it. So the Vikings have an eschatology, and we often read about it via one of their poems, the Volaspol. And the Volaspol I really enjoy as a poem, incredibly deep in terms of if you read it, there's much linking it to many other poems. It's got lots of fingers everywhere. It's a really good concentration of ideas and thoughts of the Viking world into one, and you can patch some of the other poems together to create an almost canonical story, if you would, of sort of Viking myth and how Odin came to find out about the end of the world, because that's what it really happens. So I've got a quick hello to people that are coming. Hello, Dale. So if you're not familiar with this, Odin, the chief god of the Old Norse or the Vikings, he's a relatively young god in my mind. He's certainly probably wasn't around 2,000 years ago. So it's relatively new, and he comes along into the mythology. And one of the stories is that he wants to understand what's going to happen in the future. Is the world going to end? And how can he sort it? And can he stop himself from dying and therefore live forever? So what he does is he goes into a cave and digs up a COS. You might think of them as witches, but these are old women who have been around since the dawn of time, who have seen things and have much knowledge. And this COS had seen things and had much knowledge, and he dug her up, or use magic to uh, bring her into the world of the living for a short time, to ask her some questions about how am I going to die. And she tells him he is going to die. And so that's why Odin does these many stories about how to try to prevent himself from dying. And he creates an army in Valhalla to help fight off this potential uh, issue. And this end of the world where the sort of undead, where Loki and it comes along with Hel and many others, and Loki's children, such as Fenrir and the Jormungandr, come along to destroy the world. So all that happens. Now, why is this interesting? Well, what we have found out is that there's something called a Fimbul winter in Norwegian, in Old Norse mythology, but also within sort of the history. And the Fimbul winter is a really cold winter. It was a volcanic winter, so it wasn't just a cold December. It was a cold January through to December for a year or two or three or four, caused by volcanoes. And we know there was one of these around 536, so around 1500 years ago. And it would have felt like the end of the world. And when you read the Volaspor, it does talk about this, has lines in it relating to the cold, and the sun starts to turn black and lands sink into the sea. And the stars scatter, I think, are the actual words, which suggest that there's, something's gone wrong with the sky. And that's sort of aligns to this Fimbul winter. And what we find there is around 900, there was a particular eruption in Iceland. So by 900, Vikings were going to Iceland and settling there. And it's the Halmandalhallen eruption, I think it's called. If I pronounced that incorrectly, apologies. So that was about 900, and that was huge. But what was really interesting about that eruption is it created a cave. And this cave it's probably over 1 kilometre long. It's a what you call a lava tube. It's probably 1.5 kilometres, if I remember rightly. But if you go into this cave, about 300 metres or 1,000 feet into the cave, there is a construction of a ship made of stone. And around it are animal bones and sort of sacred type objects, maybe jewelry and gemstones and the like. So it looks like there's lots of ritual sacrifice going around where this volcano erupted and caused damage and a change of the landscape. And it is believed that this sort of place was dedicated to Surtur. Now, if you're familiar with Norse or Old Norse mythology, Surtur is like a primordial fire god. So what's interesting about that is that the Volaspor probably was amended from having a dark sky at the end of the world to being changed to include this volcanic activity. And there was another volcano, I think it was in the mid 900s, 945, 939. I've got some notes there, actually. And the Volaspor now says, apart from the sky goes black, it says that steam spurts up with what nourishes life. Flames fly high against heaven itself as part of the end of the world after the sky turns dark. So to me, this is a strong indication, certainly given when we believe the Volaspor was being constructed in the version of the tale we see today in the Poetic Edda, which is believed already was probably constructed around 900 to 950. So it seems like if it wasn't constructed then, it was probably had a significant amount of what was in it, but this end bit of how the world ends with fire and alike and eruption probably happened due to Vikings living on Iceland and seeing this and amending that Volospor, and then that then travels back to Scandinavia. So that was just a piece of research that we did last week, or a couple of weeks ago now, and with my friend who's now over in Iceland at the moment, looking at these things, probably going to the cave if he can, to understand a bit more. But it's really interesting how such significant events in the landscape can lead to this, say, creation of this sacred site within the landscape, which then leads to ritual behavior, and the myth changes to include that as part of the end of the world. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. I may make a video about that when my friend comes back from Iceland with more information. So I thought I'd just put that out as people started to join. Hello, Michael. Let's say hello, Brian and Dale. Hello, Dale again. Let's see if there's any questions. Right, so questions. In case you haven't been here before, I do like to read the chat, but I can't read the chat and talk to you because my brain's off thinking about weird things, like things to say to you. So if you put question at the start of your comment, if you want a question to ask, just put question and then your question, and then it's easier for me to see it. If you provide anything else, I'll probably skip over it because I know it's probably not for me. You're having a conversation within chat. So we do have a question from Brian, who says, is it just me, or does it seem the end of Ragnarok, the destruction of Asgard, is the beginning of the world and creation of man and women from the debris? Right, so Ragnarok is cyclical. So at the end, the world will be reborn and people come. But it's meant to be a sacred cycle of things. And that's very much because the agricultural cultures and Indo-European cultures had this cyclical view of the world, that it would grow and die and repeat. It's only, I've talked about this a few times, it's only when we get into the Abrahamic religions, not only them, but they're the most prominent ones, where you get a more canonical timeline. There are sort of sacred cycles within Abrahamic religion, but they're not as, I would say, significant as part of the religion as they are in agricultural and pastoral farming cultures. So yes, at the end of Ragnarok, it does look like the world is being reborn, but that world is only being reborn to eventually fail again. So it's what's the point? You could argue, and nihilism exists for a reason. Hello, Mark. So another question. Hello, user UM4. I'll just call you user. Any thoughts on the divergence of myths between Hindu, Vedic, Aryan myths and Avestan, Iranian Zoroastrian myths? Why certain never switch roles? One system became cyclical, another linear. That is a big question. So we do see the original Iranian mythology and Iranian sort of polytheistic religion as being very much influenced by the Indo-Europeans. And we can see this because when we then look at the Zoroastrian, we can see subtle hints of that still grabbing onto the text. We see the Dharana, although I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, where like a body is split into head, body, and legs. We see that specifically in as Romanian. We see the twin figure. So Gaiamat seems to be a cognate, etymologically linked to Yimo. So we see sort of subtle hints in the Zoroastrian text. So it has all come from, or there were a previous religion, which we feel comfortable that was Indo-European. So why did it change? Which is the question, rather than me talk about something else. And that is a very good question. Uh, and these things happen sometimes. And it probably one of the significant things on Zoroastrianism is the belief that the world is not default of good. The world has a default of a chunk of good and a chunk of bad, and you have to balance that. And I'm no expert on Zoroastrianism. Uh, I think it's Mary Boyce has written some great books on them, which I'd highly recommend. But that is, someone comes along and thinks they should change religion because it better reflects society and the stories, and that happens. Why certain religions work better than others? You can't say nobody knows. It's normally because they resonate more effectively with the people there. They have are more willing to believe those stories, and so there must have been something about that happened. And to me, it's the good bad part of it that makes me feel, obviously something was going on there, that was making people feel that, the world isn't purely good. Bad is built into the world. And we see that change, and that sort of influence does flow through then into Northwest India, into the Vedic culture. Because we see sort of a more, I call it spiritual, but uh, this slightly different take on religion compared to the Europeans. So it's interesting, but I don't know the exact whys, but obviously there's normally something going on in society and the landscape that causes religion to change. Something big happens, such as a volcano going off in Iceland, where the Eddas were written. The end of the world myth was changed. If there's a big war or battle or conflict or death or plague or whatever has killed lots of people, or something else is going on, sometimes people need help. The status quo of the world is not good enough for them. Something needs to change, and that's what happens. That's my sort of my base view of that. So, hello, Recording King. Hello, Stuart. Hope you're well. Hello, Kitty. There's another question. What is the most common monster creature in mythology around the world? I would probably have to say that. But we want the mean, mode, or median here. So I would say the creature you hear of the most in most tales is probably the dragon or the snake. So in some, the dragon becomes this creature that sits just outside of your reach. So if you notice many dragon stories, the dragons you fight in the clouds or in the mountains in a far off land or in the seas, somewhere you'll never be able to go to. That's all this fight. But sometimes those dragons are within reach, and where they are, they're more like snakes and serpents. So that's probably I would say, the most common creature. So yes, that's interesting. I've made a fair few videos on dragons. Lots of questions. So Sean's got a question. We have heard a lot about the mythology of volcanoes and history of Vesuvius and Pompeii, but little about mythological responses to Vesuvius. Any thoughts? Well, that's interesting. Let me ponder 1 second. So we see, yes, because we see in 900 in Iceland, a volcano go off and the Volaspol, a key creation story, eschatological story, change for the Vikings. But then Pompeii goes off much earlier, and we don't necessarily see that change. And I may put it down to the fact that it may have been seen as to some as a message from the gods, but not necessarily such a sort of a significant message. Yes, a town was wiped out, but it didn't. I'm not sure how it affected the climate. We know in Norway we have that Bimble winter, that really cold 7-year winter type effect. And that winter lasts throughout the year. I don't think that happened over Europe with Pompeii. So perhaps whilst it seems significant to us because we can see the uh, result of Pompeii really clearly, um, perhaps it just wasn't significant enough in terms of the Roman Empire to change things. Uh, that's off the top of my head, Sean. That's my thought. But that's an interesting question. Yes, and so you asked other questions as well about eclipses. So, Sean's a patron. If you're a patron member or YouTube member, you can ask me questions anytime you want, and I'll do my best to answer them when I can. And we're having these chats, and we come up with some interesting thoughts about texts where they talk about solar eclipses and like this, like volcanoes. And I don't know if there's a database of significant world events and what stories they could relate to. But that is something interesting. I was thinking, certainly regarding solar eclipses, that sounds like a thesis waiting to happen for someone studying mythology and folklore. But yes, volcanoes as well. So yeah, that's an interesting question. Although one, I haven't got time to write a large paper on myself, but I think there's certainly some thought to be given to that in terms of adding value to mythology and how stories change. So, got another question. Does Balder have parallels in Christianity? So Balder is the favourite son of Odin. He is often compared in some ways to Jesus Christ because he's given a description that you could think of as being sort of pure in a way. He has this fair complexion and blonde hair, which within that society was considered sort of standing out, probably a little more than other descriptions. But whilst there is no mythological connection that I can see correlation between Balder and Jesus, the stories. Oh no, the stories are old, really. I mean, the stories have been written by Christians, but I don't think, and there may be themes they add in, but I don't think there's any significant themes in that of Balder. I mean, Balder is an agricultural myth, so it goes to the underworld. We consider that a sort of agricultural farming myth, which is part of the seasons. So if there's a drought, it's because a key god who helps the land become fertile has gone to the underworld and isn't around to make it rain. So then they begin to have rituals where people tend to cry to allow that god to escape and come to the world, and things grow again. So this weeping ritual is seen from the Near East all the way into Scandinavia, and Balder going to the underworld is much like anybody else going to the underworld in terms of those types of myths. So no, it isn't Christianity or links to Christianity, but yes, he does have links to the Near East where Christianity started, and you could theoretically argue there may be some indirect links there. That's an interesting take on it, Sean. That Zoroastrianism was a overturning of Vedic theology. See, I'm not too sure Vedic theology was already. You're always saying the Vedic theology, which is an Indo-Iranian religion, I would call it, perhaps, then splits where the Iranian part turns into Zoroastrianism and the Vedic persists. So that's interesting. I would certainly read up more about that. Hello, David. Don't be sorry that you're late. You haven't missed much. You just missed about the end of the world. But apart from that, everything's going really well. I will talk about lost civilizations and things in a minute. Just whizzing through the questions. So I hope that makes sense. Right. Hello, South London Reseller. Pleasure to have you here. Right. I'll answer one more question, then we'll talk about, I'll have a small rant about ancient civilizations, and then I'll answer more questions, and then we can talk about my paper. So, Kitty asks, I hear a lot about fairy tales being warning tales for children, but I wonder if anyone thinks they may have been warning tales between women, since the heroines of the tales face a lot of dangers. So, fairy tales are folk tales, or tend to be folk tales, although I should slap myself on the wrist for saying that, because you should not inform a genre of a story by what's in the story, which is exactly what my paper tries to tell. So I've just broken my cardinal rule there. So, but fairy tales tend to be considered a less authoritative type of story to society. And we actually see this as far as long ago as the Greeks, who split storytelling. So we have folklore. Folklore is the study of these stories, and folklore has under it folk tales, legends, and mythology. And so, a big giveaway if you watch one of these channels that use, say, AI for scripting. I'll have a little rant about this. You'll often say, "Oh, this story is a folklore story from whatever," where actually it should be folk tale story, not folklore. And if they're doing that, they're probably using AI that is using words out of context. But anyway, so fairy tales, are they warning stories? Well, in Greece, they split stories into mythos and logos. And mythos would tend to be stories of men fighting battles and heroes. Logos tend to be what you may consider fairy tales. They are stories that were more fabulous, which would tend to be shared between families and women and children, and not to be taken so seriously. They didn't have an impact on how society would act in the macrocosmic sense, as a pushing outwards, but they're more microcosmic, like looking into the family. So, yes, I mean, I think they were told in the fairy tales, often told in the way they are, to allow them to resonate with children more. And because they are, or they very often reflect, a danger or a warning or things you shouldn't do. So, absolutely, and women will need to be aware of that, because it's often women who are the storytellers within society when telling stories to children in this way. So they needed stories that would resonate with the women and with the children to do that. So, yes, I believe that they're structured so that they best come from women in the society, purely because they would sound a lot better, I think, and resonate more with the children. Perhaps dad's stories of surviving volcanoes, dragons, and beheading heroes didn't resonate quite as well with the children than Cinderella and climbing a beanstalk and stealing from an ogre. So yes, interesting question. So, whilst we're here, let's talk about long lost ancient civilizations. We'll have a 5-minute wander into that. And the reason I want to wander into that is because I'm often asked, or often suggested, that I speak to Randall Carson. Now, Randall Carson, I believe, does a lot of geological work and is a good friend of I can't forget his name. Isn't that bad? This sort of pseudo historian journalist person, Hancock. That's him, Graham Hancock. So, but this week, young Randall Carson tweeted something. He tweeted that the latest skeletal evidence places modern humans at 200,000 years ago, and that's 7,000 generations of humans. How come it's taken so long for us to create civilization? Surely, if we have been around that long, we would have created civilization and lost it. And this is a reboot. And what Randall takes out of context, so this is what's really going on, is that, and it's something I've sort of tried to talk about in other videos, especially the Neanderthal video, is that humans have been around 300,000 years, not 200,000. They have the same ancestor as Neanderthals, who was about 1 million years ago. And so our sort of brain shapes were getting close to where they are about 1 million years ago. It got slightly bigger as we started to cook. That made a significant difference. So what happened? Why has it taken so long? So it's not just 200,000 years. It's taken 1 million years. It's taken longer than that because the Earth's 4 billion years old. But in terms of where you get something that looks vaguely human shape, why has it taken so long? And the fact is when you hear people talk about ancient civilizations and especially advanced civilizations, which is just I don't think you need the word advanced. It's a civilization. By default, it is advanced compared to other things. People forget. Well, one, there's no real clear definition of what civilization is. So unless someone is saying civilization means this, they can mean anything from that statement. So it's a bit woolly. So if they're trying to prove a scientific point, you would expect them to define what civilization is. And to me, a civilization is, I would say, a number of things that have to develop to create itself. And one is that you need a large, stable population of people. So sedentary behavior, and you need, let's say, a population that doesn't die out just because of one bad winter or one bad crop. And therefore, they need a surplus of food to deal with such things. So they have to be really good at farming. And within the civilization, you need some institutional structure to show that things are being done by people on behalf of civilization. And then finally, you need some kind of social hierarchy because a civilization isn't flat. There will be leaders and people doing certain things. So all these things need to be in place for a civilization to exist. And the thing is that our civilizations seem to have started after around 11,000 years ago. And so we put all this into context. We have to think out, well, what's going on? And the bottom line is that, yes, in the last 100 years, we've made huge leaps in industry and technology. But the 100 years before that, we didn't make such a huge leap. And 100 years before that, it was smaller again. And 100 years before that, smaller again. In fact, we build on the shoulders of giants. Humans do. It is a exponentially, it's an exponential curve of creation and innovation that humanity is. And so it has to start somewhere slow, and then it slowly accelerates. And we're in a real period of peak acceleration right now. Certainly in terms, with things like AI coming along and computing and the like. So what you have to find is you have to have those base things in place, and you need those base things to allow you to farm and store food. You need those base things in place to allow the ability to build large sedentary structures, and then you need the ability to have a hierarchy and to be able to control that in administration, and that means probably as well, I'd add, potentially you need writing or record system to manage things. And if you put those together, and the fact that we have been in an ice age for many tens of thousands of years, and it's only the last 11,000 years we've started to come out of it. It's far easier for a population to become stable when the world is getting warmer than it is for a world that's getting colder. A world that gets colder doesn't necessarily allow for the increase of technology and ideas, except for the ability to just survive. But when the world is warmer and more pleasant and more suitable for life and for things to grow, then it's easier. So rant number one is, if you ever see anyone say civilization must be 50,000 years old or 100,000 years old or whatever, one, tell them to define what do they mean by civilization. And when they can do that, then you can take those pieces apart and explain, well, how did those things develop individually to get to that point? Now, I certainly don't believe there was any uh, human civilization outside what our current academic belief is. So that was one little rant. And then alongside that, I then saw another historian who has a degree in history show a paper saying that there was the working of grass seeds on stone 29,000 years ago. Let me get my notes up. 23,000 years ago in Jordan Valley. So it's Spivak and Nardell wrote a paper saying that the use of stone for the crushing of seeds, grass seeds, has been found 23,000 years ago. And this historian with a degree said, oh, well, farming started 23,000 years ago. Okay, so that isn't farming. So getting grasses from the land and putting it on stone and crushing it is just crushing grass seeds on a stone. Farming is about the ability to deliberately you not only need horticulture, I would say you need, I've written this down. So yes, the cultivation. So you must be able to manage those plants that are growing as they're going along. You need to modify your landscape, often with things like irrigation. But the most important thing is having human selection. So you call it artificial selection, in effect, where humans would repeatedly choose and propagate animals or plants to create better animals and plants. That is farming. Okay. The act of eating grass is not farming. Collecting grass is not farming. The deliberate artificial propagation of animals and plants, that suggests farming. Okay. So again, if you see someone talk about farming being ancient and old, ask them, where's the proof that the grass seeds are not wild but have been propagated by humans? So they're my two little rants, but they just annoyed me. I'm seeing more and more of these things on social media, and people believe it because it is a fantastic story. You think, wow, this is much older than we realise. This is much more interesting than we realise. Have we discovered something new? People love this. But it's really just people taking things out of context and not representing the data properly. And that irks me. But we seem to be living in a world where people, are getting more and more hooked on these things. So that's my rant over. But I just want to go on the record for saying civilization and farming, what they are and what they are not. So let me go through some of the questions if you've asked any, and then I can talk about the paper on what the study of folklore is, what folklore is, and the genres. So for those, there's a few more people here. If you want to ask me questions, you're more than welcome. There are super chats if you want to support me. If not, then just write question at the start of your question, and then as I whiz down all the questions, if I see someone saying question, I'll know it's a question and I'll read it, and provided it's polite, then we will answer that. So, and here we have a question. So, from user, something going, I recently read Shaman by Kim Stanley, which he considers a good take on Chauveau cave art. Your take on prehistoric myths, which can be gleaned from that cave. Mother Goddess is clear. Right. So I have made a video about cave art, and particularly shamanic cave art, and actually how the various cave art we see around the world that is often perceived to be shamanic is ambiguous at best. It's considered shamanic because of our preconceived ideas what shamans are, rather than actually we know for a fact that it is shamanic, it is representing a shaman or whatever. And I'm just trying to, I think it's Jean-Luc Lequelec who wrote an original paper on this. It's a small paper, maybe 5 or 10 pages, lots of art in there. If you look for my video on the channel, I'll talk about it. But I do think our perceptions, most people's perceptions of shamans, isn't necessarily correct. You have there is this sort of stereotypical idea what a shaman could be, but shamans, I think, are more than that, and there are different types. We see differences between male shaman and female shaman, how they work and how they operate. There seems to be a reasonably clear distinction about some feel like they travel to another world, some have the other world visiting them. It's really interesting to understand how they are perceived, how their religious ideas are out there. Watch the video and then that hopefully will explain more about that, if that makes sense. So, are there any more questions? There are. Interesting. What influence do crocodiles have on dragon myths? It would be limited because it depends on where you find crocodiles. Possibly around Australia. I'm less familiar with Australian myths and the like. The old salties there, but maybe sort of Egypt and the Nile and Africa. There may be, but again, I'm less familiar with those myths. I must admit, the descriptions we hear of dragons don't tend to correlate with crocodiles in many ways. Maybe lions, maybe serpents, maybe hawks and vultures, but not crocodiles. So minimal, I would say there, Michael. Let me look out for the word question. Yes. Right. I better hear about bad questions. Hey, Myth Fiction Podcast. Hello, Derek. Hope you're well. So, I've got other people. Hello, Oak Strong and the like. And so we just, hello, JH. Everybody's saying hello to Derek. Popular man here. Hit the like button. Yes, I keep forgetting this. If you like what I do, please hit like and subscribe button. I'm a very poor YouTuber in terms of promoting my channel. But yes, please do that. So let's have a question. So David asks, any thoughts on the not so widespread theory that hero kills dragon to save the girl, developed from girl kills dragon by magic? Well, the story of heroes killing dragons to save the princess comes from a mistranslation. There's a great paper by Bruce Lincoln where he talks about this. I think it's in Death, War and Sacrifice, I think the book may be called, where he talks about the Danu of Vedic being similar to Danu of Persian, and they mean females that lactate, and therefore and they use those words in the stories because the stories were poetic. So you can't actually, if you tell a story, once upon a time there was a hero and he killed a dragon to rescue some cows, because that was a story at the time. Interesting story, but it doesn't really resonate. It will never be a poem you want to repeat, or song or story you want to repeat. But if you make it into a poem that has some flow and ebb and easy to remember, then it's more likely to be remembered by the way it is. And so to make a poem flow, you need to make sure it rhymes or has alliteration, and therefore you can't normally talk in prose. You have to talk in poetry, and therefore we use metaphors and alike to got kennings, if you're familiar with the Old Norse, as you spoke earlier, to create this imagery. So it's just as ravens in the Old Norse are called gulls of the battlefield, like seagulls of the battlefield, cows were called females that lactate in some poems. Unfortunately, that term, when traveling, I think it was travel from the Vedic into Persia, was misrepresented and suggested that females lactate weren't cows, but were queens. And so the story of the hero killing a dragon to rescue the cows became the story of the hero that killed the dragons to rescue the queens. And that's where the story of, with the princess in a tower being rescued by a knight in shining armour and has to defeat a dragon probably comes from. So I hope that helps explain that. Oh, blimey. Sorry, I didn't see the green thumb. Thank you so much. Wow, that's incredible. I don't think I've ever been given a super chat this much before. Thank you. Thank you. He says, thank you for your thorough and interesting content, John, mate. Everyone really speaks so well. That's very kind of you, Green Thumb. Very kind thoughts as well. I really appreciate it. Wow, why didn't I see that? Oh, I've got 2 stars. There's a no. Oh, sorry. As I say, I'm not very good at YouTube. Right. So, Quark Raven. Interesting name. Right. Question. Love your video on pre-Homo sapiens stories. My instinct is that it's nearly as soon as archaic Homo could imagine the future and past and invented stories about origins and post-death. How do I think about that? And that's what I really think. I'm with you on that I think as soon as we had reasonably complex language, we would want to talk about things. And what were the big things we want to talk about? Consistently through mythology, throughout certainly modern human existence, it feels like we want to know, why are we here? Where did we come from? What happens when we die? But perhaps most importantly, why do we die? I think that is probably one of the most fundamental questions, and a question that stirs so much emotion. The ritual in terms of burial, mortuary behaviour, as we would call it. So deliberate burials with grave goods. There would be stories about it. There'd be emotion. I mean, to me, that is the seeds of religion right there. You have a really important ritual, really strong emotion, stories of the individual. That everything there is just a catalyst for great things, great stories to happen. So absolutely, I think I'm on with you. As soon as we were able to talk, have the ability to talk properly, we would do that. I certainly think Neanderthals did, without a doubt. And one thing I really kicked myself in is that I didn't talk about music, Neanderthal music. So we found our oldest musical instruments were Neanderthal flutes from bird bones. If they're playing music, they're probably singing and telling stories. And you imagine what stories they would have been. This is, I don't know. That fills me with just awe to just even imagine, Neanderthals playing music, telling stories of things that we'll never know, just lost. Just that's the magic of this. That's why I love what I do. One of those sort of, we're so tantalisingly close, but I don't think we'll ever find out. That's a really, really great question. Thank you so much, Bob Graven, for that. I appreciate that. Wow. Yes. Thank you for all your support. And for those, again, who are new here and don't know what I do, or why am I even talking to you? Why are people even listening to me? So I do study folklore, predominantly mythology and Indo-European mythology, but I also run a huge data set that is used by academics across the world, and folklorists and social scientists and authors that brings the world's narratives together. There's hundreds of thousands of narratives. They're split into motifs and mythemes. It's called the mythology database, or the folklore database, or the mythology and folklore database. Many different names. You'll find it on Google, and it allows you to study stories and gives you some good grounding on where to find their origins, why they exist. And it's currently going through a huge update right now. I have literally recreated a good chunk of the data. It's going to take a few months to finish that, and then the database will be in such better quality, state far more references in it, which are really key if you're doing research. You really want to know where data comes from. You'll have the ability to enter your own stories and include those. And yeah, but it's a huge amount of work, and it costs a huge amount of money to do. And so every piece of support is really, really helpful, and that is made free because I think folklore is here for us to share for everyone, and education I would like to be as free as possible. So that's why I do what I do, and I talk about what I talk about, and I also try to contribute back through other ways. And one of the things is a paper I've written, which I will talk about in a second. I do notice that I'm not even a third of the way through the comments yet, so there's probably a trillion questions in here which I'm missing, but I'm getting. I'll answer a few more questions, and then I'll go on to the paper. So, here's a question I get quite a lot from Exit X101, Creckenford. I'm guessing this is Crek from Crack. Craig, as a rocky place, and they ford a river crossing. The river crossing on the rocky hill. Yes, no? Close. Creckenford is the ford on the creek. Which in modern day language is now called Crayford, and it's mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles as a place where the Britons fought the Anglo-Saxons when they came into Kent. And it was a scene of a battle, and there's some earthworks that are 1,500 years old. It's a very interesting thing. But the reason why I chose it is that's the place where I used to live, and I grew up, and I just needed a name for a YouTube channel, and I like the history of the places. There's some fantastic history in Crayford, and I do go back there occasionally just to have a wander around and bring back memories. So that's why Creckenford is called Creckenford. Just a place where I used to live that has a lot of history about it. So let me quickly whiz down. Can't see anything that says question. So let me talk about this paper I've written. So I have an apology to make, a big apology. One, my tea's gone cold, which is sorry, that's a really bad way to treat tea. But when I've talked about mythology before, and when I talk about folklore and myth and legend and folktale, I made some implicit arguments in the sense that I used to say, because I'm going to change my stance now, that a myth tended to be a sacred truth. So if it had a god in and people believed it, then that's a myth, and it tended to happen in a different world. So they tend to be, because gods don't exist on this world and dragons don't exist on this world and the like. And legend tended to be something that did happen in this world but could have a bit of sacredness in it. And a folk tale, which you would usually throw in things like fairy tales in, would be stories that could happen in any world but were completely fictional, secular, so non-sacred. But the thing that has always got me with that is that we get ambiguities all the time, lots of ambiguities. So things like the aliens at Area 51, that's sort of an ambiguity, because people say, oh, there's a modern myth that aliens are at Area 51, and yet aliens aren't sacred. So how can they be a modern myth? So I wrote this paper trying to allow us to overcome these ambiguities. I'm not rewriting the beliefs and the methods and the thoughts of people like Bascom and Littleton, whose work I often quote in doing this. And they are the classical theorists in terms of classification of genres of folklore. So they wrote these tables about how you decide what a narrative is. But the problem with them is, though, even though they wrote these papers, and in the papers they explain that narratives can change and myths can become legend, and legend can become folktale, and folktale can become legend or myth, and legend can become myth. So things can transform. Uh, the sort of matrix, the templates they show on how to do this seem to be very static, in the sense that a story is either a myth or it's not a myth. It's either a legend or not a legend. It's either folktale or not a folktale, or it's history or it's not. And it's like you can't move things around. And that, whilst that's good for sort of a quick, what is this? It doesn't help the study of folklore, where a story may change throughout time. And so let me, an example of this could be, let's say, something like Jesus Christ story in the Gospels, where if you lived at the time the Gospels were written, which let's say were 1900 years ago, let's say about year 100, perhaps even earlier than that, 80, 70, you would think the story as being, well, nearly real. It's sort of within a generation or two. It happened in your location if you lived in the sort of what is Israel today, or Palestine, or around that region, Anatolia, where Christianity was spreading. And you would have a real belief in that story, and it would be sacred. So if you heard those stories and you thought they happened in your world, in your lifetime, then they couldn't be myth. They would have to be, well, folktale or legend. Now, there'd be legend if you believed it, if you thought, this is real. It's just it could be real, but you don't know if it's historical or not. You haven't got those facts, and I'll come to that in a minute. But if you didn't believe it, the story of Jesus would be folktale, because that can happen in any world. And this is the premise of this paper, which is, or one of them, which is that when we tell the story of Jesus today, we tell it, or it sounds like it's a 2,000-year-old story, and so it must be a myth. It's 2,000 years old. But it isn't. The story of Jesus is not 2,000 years old. The story of Jesus is maybe 50 years old, at best 100 years old, because the Gospels were written between 50 and 100 years after he died, and they're the stories we tell. So we're telling them as though they're 50 or 100 years old. So they're not myth. They are within, sort of in our real world, close to us. And so they are, say, legend if you believe that in Christianity and the Abrahamic God, or they are folktale if you don't. But some of you may say, what about history? What about history? So first off, history, I've also concluded, is not a genre of folklore. So history is a method in which you can say whether a story actually occurred as it did. And there's a set of methods you would use, sort of call them academic, scientific, but there's a set of methods you would look at a story and say, if it meets these, then it's history. But that doesn't mean that the story itself isn't folktale or myth or legend. So a good way to do this is, I can share my screen and I can show you where I'm going with this. So can I do this? Let's see if I can do this. Again, my absolute average technical skills will come to the fore here. So this is the narrative classification matrix, which looks in a way similar to maybe some of the other things you may have seen. And so what this does is it allows you to make two decisions. One is, when did the story take place, which is on the bottom of the narrative. So you might see my mouse wiggling around down there, the ontological setting. So that isn't the canonical time it happened. That is in the time related to the people listening to the story, like when it's created, when it happened. So for Jesus, that's maybe 30 to 80 years old. So in that sense, it's recent. And if you looked at this graph, that would be sort of Discworld contemporary. But if the story is, let's say, Troy, or like, that would be further back in time. That may be in the middle here. And if the story is like a cosmological setting, let's say Manu and Yimo, the Indo-Europeans, that would be in a different world. That's something that certainly didn't happen on this world, uh, unless you believe that this really happened in our lifetime, which is, there's no timescale for it, and it's a cyclical cycle. So as cycles are, so yeah, it wouldn't. It would always be in a different world. So it'll be down to the left. Now, the other important thing is I've got rid of secular and sacred as measurements on whether it's believed, and just call it narrative authority. So in fact, socially enforced epistemic commitment, which means that, do the people listening to the story and telling the story believe it, and how important is it to be believed? So if it's a religious story and it's being told to you by, let's say, a priest, and you are part of that religious group, then a story is probably going to have a very high narrative authority. So it's more likely to be myth or legend. If I'm telling you a story in a bar, having a cup of tea or something, then it may be considered more folktale. And so by taking those variables out, the ontological setting and the narrative authority, so in effect, you're removing things like sacredness, and you're removing things like other world, and you've removed history. So you've just got these two variables. The product of those variables decide where the story is told. So let me explain that in a slightly a bit more detail. So so transformations. So these are the transformations that happened that I wanted to sort of map, which is that we see that folk tales, if they become sacred, become myth. We can see that some folk tales, if they contain real people and the like, become, go through ostension. Legends come from myth, happen because of euhemerization. So gods become real people. But back the other way around, we see sacralization, where a legend becomes truly sacred. So there's these movements, and we'd like to map them. And so one is a simple example: the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story from the Near East, Babylon, about 4,000 years ago. It would have been told by priests about how the world became to be. It was given high narrative authority because it's from priests. It's being told by people in that society. And you have to label the society it's for. The reception community of the story is really important to understand the narrative authority. So the local community in Babylon would have heard it from their priest, high narrative authority. And because it sort of happened on the cusp of this world, so yes, there are fantastic creatures, but there are also historical figures in there. It sits sort of between myth and legend. But if we're looking at this from an academic point of view, such as I study within some of my YouTube videos, it has low narrative authority, which means that no one believes the story to be true. Though I don't believe it to be true, the people I'm telling the story to do not believe it to be true. But because we have more understanding of the historical nature of the story and can disregard some of the fantastic beasts, it sits slightly further to the right in the ontological setting. And I have a number of slides here that I will share, if I haven't already shared with some of you. And there's a new one, if you've read the paper in the appendix, on King Arthur. So this got those are red blobs on because it says that different reception groups have different views of stories, and the way we can map them out on this matrix really does allow us to understand how stories change over time with different groups. So I just wanted to say that I've written that. You can find that on post that academia.edu. That's an easy share platform. So that's on there. So feel free to read and ask questions. I will look to get that published soon. I've been through extensive amounts of feedback. I've had people really, really impressed with it. So yeah, I hope, and that's fun. The reason I've done this is because I'm writing a book on the world's oldest stories, and I wanted to show how we classify stories and how important they are as part of that book. This is like a foundational stone to the rest of the story of our stories. So I hope that will make sense. So with that, let me go through the questions, and if there are any questions regarding this or other things, I will try to answer them. Just just give questions. So if you do have questions, write question first because it's easier for me to see them, and I cannot see any questions. I see some fun facts and people talking. So there are no questions, or have I missed lots of questions, or are there questions at the end? And I don't know, because even if you are writing questions, I haven't got to them yet. Right. I can't see. Right. This is a quiet moment. Please forgive me. Here we go. Question. Two questions. Right. From young Sean again. Have you seen Religion for Breakfast recent video on modern pagan survivals in Eastern Europe? I haven't. I've had I don't know how long that's been out, but no, I haven't. I do like Andrew's work, so I will give that a watch when time allows. So yeah, if anyone doesn't know Religion for Breakfast, very good academic. Does make some very interesting videos. Does focus a lot on the Abrahamic religions, I think, but he does some general stuff as well. So yes, I haven't, but I'll watch that and give feedback if I think some is required. Another question by Kif Webb. Hello, Kif. Dragons, lots of myths from lots of places, but what are they based on? I doubt we ever had creatures that could breathe fire and fly, but a dragon myth must have been based on something, surely. Yes. So there's two views on what dragons are based on, depending on where the dragon lives. So the easy dragon story are snakes. So snakes are everywhere, and they're exaggerated form, and they're used in many cultures, as a dangerous pet, so to speak. It could be used to guard things and the like. And we've seen lots of imagery in art, snakes that are guarding things or looking after things, from the Garden of Eden to treasure in ancient Greece and the like. So that's one thing. But as I alluded to earlier, I don't know if you're here, when we hear dragon stories, the dragons are given a credible story that you could believe they're real and they're here within, but they're not. They're actually, the fights are, the storm god fights a dragon in the clouds, or the storm god fights a dragon in the sea, or the heroic warrior fights a dragon in the mountains in a far off land. The dragon is never here for us to see, not the big winged fire breathing beast that we'll think about. And so what that dragon is that's an image of the snake, but exaggerated within our minds to mean that represents either things we don't understand and can't control, or we think are evil. It's our way of, in effect, giving tangibility to an unknown evil or an unknown object. So it's like the monster that lives under your bed, except you could look under the bed to see that it isn't there. That could, in a way, be a dragon, because the same thing exists, that there is no monster that lives in the sky. There is no monster that lives in the sea, in terms of one that you kill, cut off his head, split into two and make the world from. That thing doesn't exist. And nor does the cow stealing monster of the Indo-Europeans. So yes, in some stories it is the snake, but in many it is the snake exaggerated to be a tangible beast that holds on to things we just don't understand and fear. So, more questions. Sorry. A quick forward. Right. Where would you consider less common regional variations of, say, ancient Greek myths on the low high narrative authority scale? So, where would we consider less? Right. So, it's a great. That's a great question, W.R. Merling. So, this is where it comes down to the reception community. Who is telling the story and to whom? But you have to define those. And if you define that, then you can decide the reception community. So if there is a local myth about, let's say, a troll that lives in a cave on the mountain on the edge of town, and you tell that story in the town by people who said they fought the troll and saw it at night, that may have a higher narrative authority than if you told me the story over a cup of tea in the local cafe. So the definition of the reception community is key. I probably didn't make that clear enough. Those two, narrative authority and ontological setting, are the only two variables you need to worry about, but it's absolutely key you define them precisely. And so therefore, if you define them, let's say, in one particular way, and you publish a matrix and say, this is my interpretation of how a myth has evolved to different communities, it allows someone else who knows the same subject, who are interested and look at your work and say, yes, I agree. Or it allows open discourse to say, actually, I don't agree. I don't believe they had such a narrative authority, or the ontological setting was different and it should be elsewhere. And that can either allow for plots to be expanded and stretched or moved. But it allows for a far better discourse in understanding whereabouts a story sits. And that's the beauty of it. It's so simple when you get it. And hopefully that makes more sense, so you may get it. Right. So, question, can you block Kark the Troll, please? Who's Kark the Troll? Is someone on here that shouldn't be on here? Let me whiz down. I can't see someone called Kark the Troll. So possibly not. I don't. Give me 1 second. I should really have mods on here, but I just assume this community is full of lovely people. I don't know how to find something in my comments either. So as if I see him talk, I will block him. Questions. Anyway, let's get back to questions. And if I see Kark the Troll in the comments, he's gone. If he's saying something impolite. So, question. All right. Yes. W Oldham means I said it. Yeah, that makes it clearer. So excellent. Right. Excellent. So hopefully that makes people happy that they get it. At Queckenfold Karsnark. Oh. What is Karsnark? Is Carl Karsnark? Is someone being rude? I don't know. So anyway, so that's where we are. It's yes. So that was me catching up on everything, and I think I've dealt with most questions. Were you? Oh, right. Okay. Right. So, uh, yeah, this is a happy place. No one should. I mean, everybody has the right to be offended, to offend people. I mean, because of free speech, but you shouldn't be rude here. This is a pleasant educational environment. There's no need to be rude if people are being rude. So, with that, so hopefully you've enjoyed that wandering through the end of the world, through the paper, and through various things about me getting annoyed with people who say things about ancient civilizations and early farming. A question, Credful, do you have a Harley? No. Right. So yeah. So with that, I think we're done. I think there's no more questions, and everybody is happy. I've hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the paper, and it's at least you understand it. You may not find a use for it in your day-to-day work, but for me, it'll be very useful. And I'll talk about the book maybe in the next live stream that's been written. I also have another book I'm writing, which is fiction, which is about people need to be careful about who they get answers for questions from. That's probably a good way to put it. It's quite philosophical and averagely humorous, I would say. So there's some big projects going on with the mythology database as well. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for the support. Certainly Green Thumb and Quark Raven, thank you so much for your super chats. Thank you for everyone who's liked this. Thank you for everyone who's subscribed to this, and thank you for everyone who's on the YouTube members and the Patreon. That's appreciated. There is a free tier on Patreon where you can see a vlog at least, and occasionally the odd post if there's something exciting to share. Good to see many of you back, especially you, Sean. You make my brain go on tangents when, yes, it's an enjoyable distraction. But yeah, I do think things about the solar eclipses and volcanoes, there's something needs to be done about that. So, Lindsay, sorry. Yes. Yeah, I missed a few things. The book on the oldest stories. I don't know how I can preview that for everyone and what to talk about. It really is a bit dry. Is it drier? I'm trying to write a book. I don't know if you've ever read, let's say, Sapiens by Novel Gua, or a book on that sort of regard. I'm trying to do that kind of framing regarding the oldest stories. So that's really the crux of it, to explain how we know the stories are old and how we can use scientific evidence to find that out, but also to have a better explanation on how we found those stories and how we know they're old and what they link to and their relationships. So a little like some of my videos, but I can go deeper and more specific and reference more things. And there'll be lots of references in it. So it will be a book you can use for your studies and research if you want to do those things, either in terms of getting a set of books that help you understand mythology generally, or looking at books to understand particular stories and researching those yourself. So again, it's just me trying to give something back. I think I've probably got about 6 more months work on that before I can get that published, which means it should be done by the end of the year. That's the plan. That's the big plan. And I'll try not to let you down on that. So with that, with everything, thank you so much for all your support, your kind comments. It's been a fascinating little chat, some really interesting discussions, and we will catch up again very, very soon. Have a lovely Sunday afternoon, evening, night, and I'll speak to you all very soon. Please stay safe and take care. Pip.